In the last few weeks, there's been a big buildup of United States forces in the Caribbean, apparently directed towards Venezuela. Ships, aircraft, quite a lot of troops. Something looks as if it's about to happen. What might that be?
Se están inventando una nueva guerra eterna.
This is one of the biggest buildups of American forces in some years. It involves an assault ship, a cruiser, 3 destroyers, troop carriers, a submarine, quite a lot of Marines, and now the biggest warship in the world, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, is in Split, on its way apparently now across the Atlantic to join this task group. So this clearly is a very impressive military display of power. It looks as if all this is directed at some sort of intervention in Venezuela. But an invasion itself is not very likely, and Venezuela is a pretty big country. But ground operations of some sort, hitting targets on the ground, does look as if it's in the American playbook, and certainly President Trump has indicated that that may follow next.
But we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control.
Why then might he want to do this, particularly against Venezuela, but also in a way threatening other governments in the region who he also thinks are in the same sort of situation? So far, there have been 10 strikes on boats, which the Americans say are drug runners. And they haven't tried to arrest these boats or take them into custody. They've simply destroyed them and killed the occupants, saying that these were drug runners. But if this is about counter-narcotics, these are the wrong targets, because over 80% of all of the drugs that come from Central and South America into the United States come through the land borders in Mexico. They come across the customs posts because they're smuggled through. And those that do come by boat mainly come through the Pacific, not through the Atlantic. Now, there have been a couple of strikes on boats in the Pacific, directed not at Venezuela, but at other governments in the region.
This is a national security problem. They killed 300,000 people last year, drugs, these drugs coming in. You know, it's pretty unusual when you see somebody with a fishing rod and 5 engines on the back of the boat. You know, you don't need that to go fishing. Wait. And we will hit them very hard when they come in by land.
So the Americans have already started to strike what they say are the narcotics routes, even though the rest of us know these are not the narcotics routes. So something else is clearly going on. There seem to be 2 objectives here. One, fairly obviously, is to try to remove President Maduro of Venezuela. So who's Nicolas Maduro? This man who is at odds with President Trump. He began as an ultra-leftist president. He's now just a straightforward dictator, ruling by brutal repression. He's long been a thorn in America's side, and America have tried to get rid of him in the past and failed. This may be an opportunity to bounce him out of power, to bring the opposition out onto the streets and simply frighten the Venezuelans into getting rid of Maduro. That may be easier said than done, because he's surrounded by a kind of ring of steel and quite a lot of supporters who depend on him for their livelihood.
Hoy estamos viendo la confrontación entre 2 mundos. Ellos allá, con su supremacismo, fracasado, decadente, derrotado. Y nosotros acá, con nuestra resistencia milenaria victoriosa, avanzando.
The other objective, almost certainly, is acting as a visible deterrent to all of the drug bans in Central and South America. And the message to them is that we're going to attack you wherever we see you. Wherever you're sending your drugs, we're going to attack you. So stop sending them to the United States. And in a sense, this is like deterrence by denial. If you're going to have drugs, send them to Europe, send them elsewhere in South America, but don't send them to the north towards the United States, whether through Mexico or anywhere else.
If people want to stop seeing drug boats blow up, stop sending drugs to the United States.
One of the reasons that we can be fairly certain that this is an anti-Maduro operation is because Donald Trump astonishingly announced that he was authorizing the CIA to undertake covert operations in Venezuela.
Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged
Well, I can't
drug
do
boats in
that,
the
but
Caribbean?
I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America.
I mean, they can't be that covert if the president has just announced them, but nevertheless, that's what he's done. And there's a long history of this in American relations with Central and South America. In 1961, famously, the CIA tried to displace Castro in Cuba. In 1973, they successfully displaced Allende, left-wing government in Chile, and installed Pinochet, who was very right-wing. And then in the 1980s, they ran what became the Iran-Contra affair in Nicaragua, trying to undermine the government of Nicaragua by backing their own opposition groups. Of those 3 cases, one of them was successful, though did the US no favors in the long run. 2 of them were unsuccessful. This looks as if it might be a 4th big attempt to displace a government in a big country in Latin America.
But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, but I think a lot of other countries are feeling heat too.
And interestingly, in this task force of ships that are assembling around Venezuela is the MV Ocean Trader. And the MV Ocean Trader is a special forces ship. It engages in all sorts of special operations, and it launches other ships and boats and individuals from the special forces to go and do whatever it is they've been ordered to go and do. What might this indicate in the grand scheme of things? Well, the United States is rethinking its whole security policy. It certainly wants to get out of Europe. It wants to get out of the Middle East. It wants a deal with China so as not to have to bother too much with Asia. And a lot of thinking at the moment in the United States is that the US will be isolationist for the next era, which means the next 30 or 40 years. And that isolationism will also take the form of regarding Central and South America as America's zone of interest, its zone of influence. And in a sense, I think what the Trump administration wants to do is to show governments in Central and South America and drug cartels in Central and South America that there is a new sheriff in town, and that sheriff is in Washington. I think we might see more of this in the 2 or 3 years to come of the Trump administration.